The Happy Valley Adventure Bureau would like to welcome everyone to the annual Center Film Festival. We wish that in-person events would have been possible this year, but we want to thank you for joining us in this virtual event. We hope to welcome everyone to Happy Valley, Pennsylvania very soon. From the Happy Valley Adventure Bureau and happyvalley.com, we hope you enjoy the 2020 Center Film Festival.
Hello and welcome back, everyone. I don't know if you've just finished all these films that we're about to meet the filmmakers. Maybe you'll be watching this later after you watch the films. If you are watching live, there's comments that you can, or that side, depending if you're on YouTube or on Facebook. We'd love to hear from you. My name is Pearl Gluck. I'm the co-founder of the Center Film Festival with Kurt Chandler. And I'm really excited about this panel for a number of reasons. I'm a little bit of like fangirl with Tony Buba. I have discovered his work through Lightning Over Braddock, and then just the pacing and the way in which he tells his stories and the depth, which this kind of unexpected layering and subtlety. It's just something you can always depend on with Tony's work, but it always made me feel like I was in a way understood. So that's my personal note. So I'm very excited. It's the very first time I've ever had the opportunity to bring Tony Buba to an event like this or show his work in a public space, though his work has shown in public spaces since 1972, Tony. So I'm a little late. I might have been born that year. I'm not going to get into any more details on that. And then I used to teach with Alex Fattal. He was here at Penn State, made this incredibly beautiful film named Limbo, which I'm sure you already know. And so I'm also thrilled because we have the opportunity to hear from him. He's one of those people that is both in film criticism and kind of a more intellectual approach to filmmaking, and is also a filmmaker. So I think you're in for a real treat there as well. And Jenny Shi, I've never met before. I've discovered her through her work, which, as you now know, is award-winning and beautiful. I think this is your debut feature doc. Am I right? It's incredible, Jenny, and your sensitivity and awareness, your craft, your storytelling is remarkable. So I think that this panel is going to be wonderful in its own right. However, I've asked Shyam if he wouldn't mind hosting it, because I also work with Shyam, and he's just one of those people that gets right to some of the deeper issues, but with a sense of humor and understanding and a depth of awareness of what it is you're going to discuss. So I'm extremely excited for you, but also for me, because I get to listen in too. So if you have any questions, please do jump in the comments and be in touch with us. Otherwise, enjoy the conversation, and we shall see you after.
Thank you, Pearl. Thank you all for being here and for wonderful work, your wonderful work. I had the pleasure of viewing them in sequence, in the sequence that we have it listed here on this page, as well as on our website. And that sequence is Limbo first, Reflections next, and then Finding Ying. So I'd like to kind of begin our conversation in that order. Maybe ask a question for Alex first, since his is the first in that sequence. And it so happens that I'm a little bit more familiar with Alex and his topic. In fact, I had the pleasure of visiting him on his site in Colombia a few years ago when he was doing field work there as a faculty colleague of mine here at Penn State. So this topic is, I think, somewhat more familiar to me, even though, of course, Braddock is not too far from where I live in Pennsylvania. And so anyways, Alex, I was struck by kind of some of the decisions you took in kind of making this film, the first of which that for me was the most interesting was this view from a moving vehicle. I'm assuming it's some kind of a train, but it's some kind of a, there was a peephole in the beginning with a truck and so forth, and then there was this theme of the person always in a moving vehicle, and I was wondering what made you come to that decision?
Mm. Thanks, Shyam. And it was wonderful hosting you in Colombia. I remember it fondly. So these are this person, Javier Alexander. He is one of many demobilized guerrillas in Colombia, people who have left the ranks of the insurgency. And so this word demobilized was always a word I was wrestling with in my scholarship. What does it mean to be demobilized? And there's this whole long history to the word. You know, previously it had to do with state armies, and in World War I, after people had mobilized, Germany and England, all these countries had mobilized for the war. After the war, they had to demobilize their soldiers, and so that word then spread and became a little bit more flexible in its usage. But these people never really stopped being mobile. They're haunted by their past experiences of war, and their security situation is a little bit precarious. For the former FARC fighters at the time that I was filming, this was before the peace accord of 2016, their biggest worry was the people who, their former comrades who they had kind of deserted from and defected from. And so you couldn't just kind of pitch up in their houses, because that was the sensitive part of the story, was where they were located at the time. So this idea of being in a constant motion, kind of moving through the city, became a kind of an inversion of the road trip film, like a kind of a journey without a clear destination. And by shooting it in what was a payload of a truck that I had transformed into a giant camera obscura. So if you go back to like third grade or so, you might remember drawings of the camera obscura where the kind of light comes in diagonally and reflects, upside down, and then the mirror will flip it back right side up, or our eyes or our brains will do that. So this upside down world became a kind of place to play with a lot of the things that these former rebels had experienced, this sense of having a past that was very much present, and all these things that were kind of intersecting. So it became a kind of a metaphor, a mise-en-scène. It was just a real interesting space to work beyond the kind of intellectual things that I've thought about and wrote about after the fact, as a kind of confessional space or a psychoanalytic space. It was also just a really interesting trial and error process of putting it together. And it was magical. At first, I didn't think I was making a film. I thought I was making a photography project. And I was just going to take still photos in this truck camera and have kind of narratives. But then when I was inside the payload for the first time, and then it started to move, and the trees were kind of moving and the clouds were going along the floor, it was a really kind of a magical space. And I became determined to make a film out of it. So,
I think without without it being a motion picture, you will not be able to, fully grasp what it is that you were trying to convey. So I'm glad you converted that into a film rather than a photography project. Yeah, I was going to ask you next about the upside down thing. So you kind of covered that. I think it's certainly, these are two things that kind of struck, as kind of, for me at least, to the uniqueness of your film and this particular piece of filmmaking. And so I'm going to loop back to you, Alex, but in the meantime, I want to go to the others as well. And, maybe you can do a round robin kind of thing. As Tony, I enjoyed your film very much as well. And I had basically, one kind of reaction as I kind of watched the film is I kept having to tell myself that it's not the framing of what's behind. It's actually, I kept telling myself, no, it's what's in front. So it's almost like you're showing through the mirror, that which is behind rather than that which we are looking into as a frame. So it's an interesting use of a framing device. So I was wondering if you could tell us more and inform us about how that came to be and the thinking process behind that.
Well, I mean, every so often I go back making films about Braddock, and the most recent one I did before this was called Ode to a Steel Town, where I went around asking everybody what is the poetry of Braddock, and I incorporated that into a film. So I'm always trying to figure out different ways how people see the community and what they're looking through. And I was working with Mary Carey, who works at the Braddock Carnegie Library and is part of the Arts Lending Program, and herself a very creative person. And we came up with the idea of shooting through the mirror. So everything is not quite what you see, and that. I mean, so that was the device we decided, and then we went to different locations throughout the town, and some you end up with accidents that occur, like the gentleman Tim who's coming down the Rankin Bridge and starts talking to us and the other people we ran into. But the idea of shooting in that frame, I mean, I do documentary work, but I also go to a lot of festivals, watch a lot of festival material, and end up seeing things and I think this might have been, if I remember correctly, someone had done something in the mid 60s shooting through a mirror, and it stuck through me, and it stuck to me. And I mean, so I just wanted to try that approach for this, and to present, and once again, to present Braddock through a different type of lens.
Great. Yeah, I mean, it was for me the first time that I'd seen something like that, and it certainly was somewhat mind-bending for me, the whole experience. But it was also very kind of telling in a way.
Well, I think the programming was really good. I mean, one thing about festivals is it's also the art of the programming. I couldn't figure how my film was going to relate to the two films we're watching but we do have, outside of playing with the frame and playing with the image, and it's an Alex film. Then also at the end of the film, the two people saying about the violence in Braddock, but it's still a good place to live. I mean, so then I start thinking about Jenny's film. I mean, so the placement of the piece was great. So thank you so much for that.
Yeah, I mean they're all seeking resolutions at some level. Yeah, and that's kind of a nice theme. That's actually Pearl's handiwork. She deserves full credit for programming it the way she did, and I think it's a nice juxtaposition of these very different takes on that particular theme. I'd like to go to Jenny next. Again, Jenny, that was a great piece of filmmaking, very, very touching, very moving. And, I actually worked with a lot of Chinese scholars in my own lab. And this is particularly kind of, it kind of hit a nerve, not just with me, but also some of my students I shared the film with. The vast majority of them are from China, and they told me about kind of the legend around the story, even in the Chinese social media and so forth. And I think you kind of brought out that the family angle and the sorrow that kind of underlying this tragedy and crime. So was Ying your friend from your days at Peking University, or did you even know her at that time? Or?
So I didn't know Ying when I found out she went missing. I learned about the news that she went missing through my college alumni group chat. So after that, I figured out we actually went to the same university in China. But at the beginning, I just didn't know her.
Okay. Because I thought there might be some other connection that precedes this whole, or you kind of knew her. But yeah, that's certainly I'm sure was very shocking for you. And did you at that time, when you heard this on the group, that was it something that struck you as a film project at that time, or was it? How did it even come about? The whole. Can you tell us a little bit about the sequence? of events?
So Ying went missing in the summer of 2017. And at that time, I was a student at Northwestern University. So both Ying and I, we were Chinese international students. And when she went missing, I think it was like after like 2 or 3 days, I got a message in my college alumni group chat. So apparently, her disappearance was a huge news among Chinese international students, and everyone was just spreading the words and trying to find her. And I didn't think about, making film or things like that at the first place. I was like anyone else, posting her information on my Facebook, and also, telling friends to see, whether they saw a girl, go to someone else, things like that. So I think it was like, basically the family arrived a week after her disappearance, and I saw many people visiting the family. There were like local Chinese Americans and also international students, Chinese students. They were trying to help the family because they didn't know English and they knew nothing about America. So it was very important for them to have someone from the Chinese community to stay with them. So I also went down to Champaign. Anyways, Chicago isn't really far away from there. So I would visit them like once a week. And at that time, I realized that, the story got a lot of news coverage. There were a lot of reporters, national reporters and local reporters around the investigation, and also anything about, the mystery of the Ying's disappearance. But for me, I approached them first as a volunteer, and I saw a lot of struggles behind headlines, and I just feel like that's something really missing in the whole news coverage and the whole story. And I started to think about what I could do for the family. Some people would like donate, and some people would deliver like groceries to them. And I had cameras, and I know how to tell a story. So that's how I started capturing the footage, what's happening, at that moment. And I think it was like a month or two later, I officially pitched the idea to the family that, I'm going to maybe like document their journey and also document the places Ying used to study and used to work. So it was like a process of building trust and figure out, what I'm going to do. And again, I didn't even think about it's going to be a feature-length film, because I was thinking we will find Ying very soon.
Yeah, and unfortunately, that was not to be. And so, it ended up, being a beautiful kind of telling of this very, very sad story. So it was well done with great sensitivity, as Pearl said at the outset. Coming back to Alex, my next question to you was about the forcing the audience in a way. I shouldn't probably use the word forcing, but it kind of when I was watching Limbo, it made me kind of focus probably more than I normally would to the to the subtitles. And of course, I'm not familiar with the language. And so if somebody is familiar with the language, then maybe forcing people toward the voiceover became much more critical, it seemed, in your film. So I was wondering if that was, again, a conscious decision. And if so, why that emphasis on kind of the monologue, the voiceover with the subtitle? Alex, you're muted, I think.
In a way, it's too bad that the subtitles do compete with the image. I mean, the subtitles always, do some form of damage to the image. But one of the things that we struggled with in the film was to kind of get a full arc of the story. We felt that it was important to give a little bit of background in terms of his early life, and it's not a linear narrative. And then, of course, his dreams are an important feature of the story, and kind of his unease in his kind of post guerrilla life. So there were a lot of elements, and we tried to give it some kind of reflexive spaces where people could just kind of sit and kind of be on this journey. It of course takes place in a truck, but we were in a way trying to simulate the feeling of kind of sitting next to somebody on a bus, and them telling you a story, and you having kind of like your eyes out the window while you're overhearing the story, and with the person next to you. Perhaps it's a little bit discourse heavy. The other option was to make it a little bit longer, which kind of runs into the other problem of, how long can you keep people locked into the payload of a truck camera?
Right.
But, yeah.
But yeah, I think it was certainly in a way dynamic, but at the same time, I felt like there was a conscious decision to kind of focus on him telling the story. But I now see the kind of the overhearing part that didn't occur to me, but I think beautifully does that.
Right. The idea was to kind of lull you into the story in the beginning, and then as we get to this dream with the devil, that's kind of at the crux of the recounting, the image begins to go upside down, right? And so the idea was to kind of have a kind of more commonplace narrative, and then things take a somewhat surreal turn. So I don't know if people who viewed it experienced it that way, but that was the idea.
Yeah, I mean, I think that came together very well. Both the monologue, the upside down, and of course the motion. I think those are all very key elements of this particular film. Tony, moving on to Tony next again. You mentioned something about the poetry of Braddock, and I know you've done work on Braddock, and so I was wondering why Braddock and what's so special about Braddock. Maybe a little bit more about the poetry of Braddock that can help us view this short film with its full. Yeah.
Well, yeah, I started making films with Braddock since 1972. I've concentrated on one town. I always thought of as making short pieces of the community, plus I do some long form films also. But I really wanted my fantasy at that time, which is now turned as almost a reality. I wanted to have a 50-year arc of one community where we see the changes taking place. And it was started doing this when I was in grad school, because I was away for a while, and I came back home and I saw the changes that were happening. I knew the type of culture, the type of jobs from the industrial jobs I sensed they would be gone. So I wanted to document this at that time before that disappeared. And so I just got some grants and had some success in doing it. And I just I kept going through. And so I have maybe 4 or 5 features, and I think 20 or 30 docs on mostly on Braddock. And like I said, they vary form and length, but I wanted to do, if you sat down in one long viewing, that you could see this big arc take place of what happened to the community. And once again, I come up with different ideas of doing it. And what I said about the poetry is what I just went around for this Ode to a Steel Town and asking people what they thought the poetry of Braddock is. So I try to incorporate people within the community also in helping me make the work. And from that, I was really inspired by Appleshop, the work they do. But also, in getting back to what Jenny was saying about having not the headlines. And what I've been doing recently, actually, is just shooting a lot of material, whether it's demonstrations with Black Lives Matter or other material, because I'm 77, so I don't know how much longer I'll be working and making films. But what I'm trying to do now is actually make an archive that other filmmakers can use in the future, so they can go back and see what is the backstory of it, instead of having to buy 30-second sound bites from network news and that type. So maybe films could have a little more depth. I mean, so I'm really like thinking in those terms now. of like long form archival material. The University of Wisconsin at Madison is going to house all this stuff, so I just want to end up being available, because what's the sense of doing this all your life and having it sit on a shelf somewhere and other filmmakers don't have access to it to reinterpret it and to apply it for whatever happens in the future. So that's what I'm doing now. I mean, I'm also working on films and trying to finish some new ones, and I have a couple in the works, but when I get it done, I'm not sure.
No, but that's great. I mean, I think you have, I'm sure Alex will appreciate this as an anthropologist. So the archives will not only help other filmmakers, but I'm sure it'll also be of great scholarly value, and for historians and anthropologists as well. And congratulations on having this host for it, a stable host.
Yeah, it'd be a stable host, and I'm having everything digitized so we could have eventually have a platform where it's up that people can have access to it. Of course, there will be restrictions. I wouldn't want just anybody making films out of the material, but there will be that type of restrictions. But yeah, that's sort of fine. And I actually wanted to ask Jenny a question. I mean, when your film started, and I'm watching it, I said, "Oh man, something's bad's going to happen." Then I started remembering the story as it was going on. I mean, how emotionally draining it was for you to make this piece. I mean, how much of you, I mean, I just can't imagine the emotions you felt.
Yeah, so I don't know, because it's my first feature film, and I didn't really make any film before, so I thought making independent film, it was that difficult. Emotional wise, I mean, I would have I had nightmares when I first started the project, and I was even debating myself, thinking about whether I should pursue this project. Because for me, I just feel like, filming a family in grief, how I'm going to deal with their emotions, and also whether it's ethical to do that. And also, I started as a volunteer. If I decided to making the film, am I exploiting the relationship I've already built with them? So I have so many questions about that. But anyways, I decided to move forward because I really see the potential of the film, and eventually we want the film to be something to celebrate Ying's life, and hopefully can preserve her legacy. And we also, not only capture Ying's parents, their emotional journey, but also in post-production, we try to keep Ying alive throughout the whole film. There were moments I was really confused about my role. On the one hand, I'm a filmmaker, documenting what was going on. On the other hand, I'm sort of close to family, and there were certain situations I would, debating myself, basically, decide whether I should keep filming or just, give the family some space to take a break from all the emotions. So I've been, challenging myself constantly by those questions. It was, I mean, overall, I think emotional wise, it was difficult to deal with. But, anyways, we've done with the film, and the film is out in the festival right now, and I'm still in touch with Ying's parents. We actually showed the film to them before it went out to any public screenings, because we wanted to make sure they're okay with what's in the film. And since they trust me so much, and they give me so much basically intimate moments to film, I should just respect them, and to make sure there's no consequence, after releasing the film. Yeah, that's basically my feeling.
Yeah, it was very powerful. Some of especially the trip you made back to China, and I'm assuming that you made only one trip. I'm not sure if you made several, where you went to there. We
actually have 5 trips to China. Okay. So, but I didn't go back all the time. I only went back for the first 2 trips because of my visa. Later on, I wasn't able to really travel freely between the countries. So I have another cinematographer, and also have friend in China who help us to film. I would say a lot of scenes and events in the film were not well prepared in advance. sometimes we would know maybe just a week before things gonna happen, and I was in the US. How could I just go back and film? So we need to figure out what's the best way. And I also wanted to make sure that the family, they were comfortable with the people we are sending to film them, because it's such an intimate story. So I would try to ask my friend or someone like was on set with me before. So the family, at least they knew that person. So that's how I did. And yeah, we did one in 2017, and I also went back in 2018. That was the big chunk in the film you saw. And I think late 2018, we had a trip in China when the FBI and the prosecutors, they visited China to collect testimonies from Ying's friends and colleagues. We ended up not using that footage because eventually the film is not really about investigation. So we just cut that part. And in 2019, we also made a trip to China. And late 2019, after the trial, we also went there to capture the aftermath. Yeah.
Yeah, what struck me was some of those moments, how the relationship between the father and the mother were kind of almost at a break point. That you kind of, I found that particularly, intimate or private. That I was actually quite stunned to see that eventually in the film. And I don't know if that was a point of discussion. And also throughout, I was wondering if you had ever shown this to the mom, because she seemed completely distraught. And was she even in a frame of mind to kind of allow this film to portray her the way she ended up being portrayed?
Yeah. So this film, both the parents watched the film before it went out to festivals, and Ying's boyfriend also watched the film. So I would say the focus of this film is really to see who Ying was and how much her life has touched others. So for us, in terms of storytelling, it was very important to show how the loss of Ying has affected everyone around her. And which means, it's important to show like the family conflict. I still remember like when I was filming that scene, I wasn't really expecting, things like this happen. Ying's parents, they fought. I wouldn't say a lot, but occasionally they would fight. And they actually fought like in 2017 when they were still in the US, but I wasn't filming at that time. I was there basically trying to stop the fight. And in 2018, when I was staying at Ying's family's house, they treated me like their own child. And they were really, I feel like they didn't really, try to hide their emotions in front of me. And I was like filming the breakfast, and all of a sudden they started to yelling at each other. If you still recall like the specific scene in the film, we actually cut to a close-up of the broken bowl.
Yeah, I saw that, and him cleaning it up, the dad cleaning it up afterward. Yeah.
Yes, immediately, because I was in the shot at the time. I actually, we just filmed a little bit, and I started to interfere like the fight. I tried to, separate them. So I was in the shot. So we basically didn't use a lot of the fighting scene, just a little bit, and really to show, like the Ying's parents, they still love each other. They care about each other. But just because of this tragedy, basically destroy the family relationships. And I would say like that's not like a single case. When I'm doing the research, when I was filming this story, I also learned that early, I think in 2014, 3 years before Ying's disappearance, there were also like several Chinese international students. They were killed I think they're from USC. And there were other like filmmakers following their family's journey. And actually, we talked to each other, and they said actually their that student's parents, they also had like some trouble with the family relationship. So it was very normal that something tragic like this happened. It basically you saw like the family relationship just be destroyed. And that's something we don't really see, in news media. And for the family, when we show the film to them, I was a little bit nervous about the scene we included, because in a Chinese culture, we just don't want to show, family affairs to the public, especially this is something, we have a culture like saving face. So we just don't want to do that, right? So I was a little bit nervous, but Ying's parents, they didn't really say no, or they didn't really have a big reaction when they saw this, because they feel like that's what exactly happened. And no one really know like what actually happened inside the family. There were a lot of rumors actually around their search for Ying. They thought, I think in 2017, there were rumors about they are taking advantage of their daughter's death, try to, get money from donation, things like that. But people just, people outsiders, they didn't know what exactly happened in the core of the story. So we just try to, show a full picture of what happened. And Ying's mom, I would say like it was very difficult for them to watch. But when we showed the film to Ying's parents, I actually asked two of my friends visit Ying's parents and brought the film on their laptop to show them in person. And me and my cinematographer, we Skyped in. In a normal situation environment without the pandemic, we would love to show them in person, but right now we can't travel. But we still want to, some sort of, be with them in person. And one of my friends, throughout the whole time, she was hugging Ying's mom. And so Ying's mom, she don't know English, and she can't read Chinese. So even with Chinese subtitles, sometimes she can't really understand. So my friend was translating real time to Ying's mother. Ying's brother, he decided not to watch the film because for him, he feel like he still needs some time to digest, what happened to his sister. And for us, we haven't distributed the film in China right now. Right now, it's just in festivals in the US. So the family, they didn't really. We didn't really see any consequence of releasing the film, but we are constantly in a conversation with the family about the plan in China. Ying's father, he definitely want to have a big release because he really wanted to have their story be heard by the public. But we also want to make sure the way we market the film is not true crime. It's really about who Ying was and how, just to see how much her life has touched others. So we are still in conversation with Ying's family.
Yeah, ultimately it's a great tribute to her, but also how it can have ripple effect through the family and others who were close to her when she was alive. Yeah, I think the thank you for sharing all the kind of details about the motivations behind it and also the stories. Coming back to Alex and talking about motivations, are we to infer from your film that some of the central motivations for these rebels to become rebels, to demobilize? From what I heard, it seemed like boredom was a big factor, or at least one of the factors. And also I picked up fascination with weaponry, and of course employment, the kind of the need for structure, a military type structure. I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about some of the central themes for you that you were wanting to kind of showcase with that monologue.
Yeah, there are many reasons people will join a guerrilla group or even a paramilitary group. Right now, Colombia is awash in armed groups. Still, unfortunately, there was a 2016 peace accord, and the kind of war machine grinds on. Part of the FARC is remobilized, and the drug trafficking is still going on, and the paramilitaries are as strong as ever, and they're tied in with the drug trafficking. And unfortunately, and this is something I write about in my academic work, it becomes this kind of recombinatory machine that there's people will leave, they'll demobilize, they'll go through a reintegration program, but they'll come upon economic hardship, and the easy way out of that is oftentimes remobilizing maybe with the right-wing group that tends to be lucrative. The guerrillas really don't pay anything. What they pay is they give you free room and board, if you will. you sleep in the jungle, but your immediate needs are taken care of. So one of the main reasons that people join the guerrillas, most of the FARC, but also the ELN, which has kind of grown since the 2016 peace accord, is the domestic dispute at home. They fought with their parents. Their parents are in a difficult situation. They can't send them to school. Some of them maybe took jobs pulling coca leaves off of the branches. That is the kind of base of the political economy of cocaine, which will then lead to recruitment later, or if they live in a rebel area, they might just be sent as a messenger, go send this message, go do this, and they'll gradually get more, be trusted by the guerrilla movement, and that will kind of organically lead to their joining. Sometimes, as you say, yes, it's kind of being enchanted with the nice uniforms or the weaponry, motorcycles. I mean, there's all sorts of material reasons why. What are ultimately adolescents? The average age of recruitment is 15, and sometimes can be quite younger than that. I think official guerrilla policy was 15, but in practice could dip down to 12, 13, and starting to do favors at 10, 11. So it's a bit of a nightmare, and it's tied into the fact that there's such inequalities in the distribution of wealth in the country. It's a country of regions. It's kind of trifurcated by 3 branches of the Andes. You have the Pacific, you have the Caribbean, you have the plains jutting out to Venezuela, you have this desertic peninsula in the northeast, you have the Amazon in the south. And through all these regions, there's kind of limited infrastructure, and really the wealth is concentrated in the major cities. So until there could be a kind of more functional state and better prospects in the rural areas, the kind of war machine will be robust. It's for people who study Colombia, like one of the questions is why at the end of the Cold War, where many of the civil wars in Central America kind of came to an end, why does the war in Colombia persist? And one of the reasons is because there's so much money sloshing around, and now the connections between Colombia and Mexico are all the more robust, and there's a kind of hemispheric problem in terms of the production and distribution of drugs and the efforts to try to curtail that, which are quite violent in their own right. And I'm sorry to report this, is the moment of optimism that existed in late 2015, 2016, even early 2017 has really dissipated at this point. So.
Yeah, and I think the kind of the ongoing, issue. I think among the 3 films, I think that's the one that really is nowhere close to any kind of resolution, or or seeking resolution in some respects. And I think
that's why we wanted to keep it without a destination. Like this idea of a journey without a destination, this sense that the kind of truck stops in the middle of the city and people just kind of walk on, and the last thing we hear on the soundtrack is the kind of clack of people's shoes on the sidewalk, because there is no resolution. There are all these kind of unfinished threads. So yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Tony, you were talking earlier about how there's a 50-year arc and so forth that we could draw from some of the works that you've done. And obviously, I've not had the pleasure of viewing all of them, and probably many viewers may not have.
I'll throw a plug out here. Available from Kino Lorber. For
So, but I was wondering if
1995
you were,
a DVD collection on Blu-ray.
yeah, I mean, we are happy to plug that. They're great. Thank you. But if you were to just summarize that arc in terms of, like a layperson historian, if you were to kind of tell us, or maybe even what surprised you most with Reflections, when you did Reflections, like what was it in Braddock that you perhaps noticed that you didn't in 1972 that made you kind of feel like there's a change in this town?
Yeah, well, see, Braddock for me has always represented a microcosm of the whole sort of decline of the the Rust Belt, the whole industrial Northeast. You have in this town, it's only less than 1 square mile. Right now, when I was growing up in Braddock as a kid, there were maybe 12,000 people living there. It had its peak in the 1920s when about 25,000 people were there. And now it's down to under 2,000. I mean, it's not that it's an isolated community. It's surrounded by these other boroughs, too, and all their population has dropped. So I always looked at what happened in Braddock because it was the first home of the first Andrew Carnegie integrated steel mill, first home of the first Andrew Carnegie Library. And so it was, and it's also one of the first to decline of an industrial community, even though there were a lot of factors involved in it, including white flight and other things that led to the town's decline. But like I said, so I started this in '72 with a film about my grandfather's shoemaker shop. They were closed. It was shutting down. My grandfather died years before, but my grandmother rented the shop out. Now it was closing, and she sold it to a person who was having a grand opening of a new and used furniture store, which I thought was sort of the American dream on carried to absurdity. And a lot of it is just from in college studying, minoring in majoring in psychology, but also minoring in philosophy, and a lot of some really good philosophy teachers that were. That I got introduced to a lot of Marxist theories, and I sort of bring them into my films, but they're really buried in a sense. And I also wanted to do something where, at that time, you didn't see too many working people on the screen in film, so I wanted to have images of working class people. When I first got into filmmaking, it was fairly expensive, so you had a lot of people that were. There were a lot of people with trust funds that were making films, and I just wanted to give a different perspective and coming from a working class background. And actually, with the first couple films I made, people didn't quite know what to make of them because they have that sense of a lot of working class humor in them that could be, read as being cruel. I mean, it's but that was in some of the early work. But Reflections, I mean, we start getting to where the town now is. It keeps trying to come back. I mean, it's always, and the people. It's an amazing group of people that have always lived there. That they've always been fighting. We've been fighting so long. The first fight, of course, the French-Indian War, up till now, where in terms of fighting, we fought for the closure of the Braddock Hospital, which UPMC ended up closing, and it would. And now we're fighting against fracking that wants to take place at the Edgar Thompson Mill. So the community has always been active and always fighting. And I've just been documenting that whole journey of what people have been doing it. And I go back and forth actually between filmmaking and activism. I mean, a lot of times I'm on the other side and people are filming me because I'm actually doing it. And in Reflections, like I said, I just wanted to look at a different space, like the one place we filmed where the two guys are talking with actually my cousins. They're in the shot. It's in front of a brewery that opened up. And so that was interesting. But so it's been I've been doing it, and and it really was. When I first started doing it, I started making them, and then someone came up calling them the Braddock Chronicles. And so then I ended up just, okay, let me just keep going with this. Let the grant money come in. It's more than that, but it's just, it was just an inspiration to do that and concentrate on this one town, which nobody is, you don't see that too often in American cinema.
Right. And, I also thought that there's some parts of it that were surprising to me, like finding a black couple and a couple of guys. I don't know if they were necessarily gay, but it seemed gay in the middle of Pennsylvania. But it seemed like these were not the kinds of scenes that are part of the stereotype of the industrial town in Pennsylvania.
Yeah, I mean, there's, I mean, I could actually, when I was getting my MFA and defending my thesis, I was asked by one professor, do I think I could ever make a film outside of Braddock? And I said, I don't think I would have to ever leave Braddock. I've made other films outside of Braddock, but there's just material is there. And right now, a person who from Braddock, who's probably one of the best known photographers in the world right now, LaToya Ruby Frazier, and so the town itself is really unique in the people that it has produced.
Yeah, and that comes through. Yeah. So back to you, Jenny. I was, again, thinking in terms of the seeking resolution theme. I was struck by kind of the different closures that you had in your film. I mean, I could identify at least kind of 4 different types of closures. There was this burial, kind of a small makeshift burial cemetery type deal, not in an official cemetery, but just to kind of bring closure to themselves, I think. There was also that very touching meeting with the killer's girlfriend, former girlfriend. And then there was also, the scene with the parents and the family, even the brother, kind of leaving empty-handed in the airport. And then the 4th thing for me was also this kind of the boyfriend talking about fulfilling Ying-Ying's desire to do voluntary teaching, kind of carrying on her dream and so forth. So I was wondering if you had to, at some point, decide between these 4 closures, but then decided to have them all in, or how you saw them. I'd be interested to hear your take on what I saw as kind of 4 different ways in which you could seek closure.
Yeah, I mean, for me, there's actually no real closure for the whole story, because from the very beginning, and also like the film title is Finding Ying-Ying. So it's always the family's desire, hope to bring her back. Like there's a Chinese saying, fallen leaves return to their roots. So they couldn't really bring her back. So they have to bury her some personal belongings at the memorial garden. And also going back doesn't really mean, real closure for them. They're still suing the university because of the counseling center where the perpetrator visits express his murder plan several months before the actual kidnapping and the murder happened. So the family, they're continuing the fighting. But for me, at least, there's some closure. For me, like the film title, there are 2, layers. One is physically, whether we can find Ying. The other one is actually to get to know who Ying was. And I never knew Ying before, but, in the past 3 years, I've been talking to her family's friends, and I've been reading I read her diaries. So I feel like I got really close to her. I just feel like, she's like an old friend of mine, even though we never, met in the real life. And but I just wish, I could know her, such an amazing person. And she actually became, some sort of inspiration for me, just like she's an inspiration for, to Ying's boyfriend. Right now, he's carrying on her spirit to keep moving forward and helping others, and always, be kind to everyone around them. So yeah, so that's my takeaway on the, the closure. But I don't know. I'm just hoping, the family eventually, I won't say they would really move on from this tragedy, but somehow, the pain and or the grief can, I don't know. I actually just talked to Ying's parents I think last month about some updates on the film. Ying's father brought up this conversation again about, they still couldn't fall asleep, even now, even today, a year after the trial. So it was very difficult. But somehow, as I'm always saying, that the film can be something celebrating his life. So maybe that could be, something like closure. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great thought. I mean, if your film can bring that level of comfort and closure, that'll be a wonderful contribution you've made. In addition to informing us all about this, take, or giving us this take on this particular film. Well, I think we're coming to a close here, and I was wondering if you guys had any questions for each other. I know Tony already kind of asked his question.
I was going to ask Alex a question quickly.
Yeah.
He was talking about, with you making the film and the person becoming visible, is there any chance that he will be murdered? I mean, I was just sort of, because he had talked about that.
I don't think the film raises his threat level. He's led a long and complicated life, and I've been very transparent about the fact that I'm making this film. I've showed him various cuts. I showed him the final cut, and he's been supportive. I think it's a point of pride that he's kind of featured and he gets this kind of visibility. In terms of what he's doing since he's gone into the family business, so to speak. He's gotten involved in this kind of shamanic arts. He comes from an indigenous community in Southern Colombia, so he has been an apprentice to his cousin, who is a shaman. And the main threat that he felt that he was facing was from his former comrades who have since demobilized. So these demobilized guerrillas have been very savvy in terms of measuring their own levels of risk. At the same time, we have to acknowledge that Colombia continues to be a very dangerous place. But his appraisal was that this wasn't really going to change anything for him, and he's moved back and forth, sometimes being in Southern Colombia and sometimes returning to the city. So, yeah.
Okay.
Great. Any other closing questions from anybody else to each other? Well, if there are no questions, thank you all so much for spending this hour with me, answering these questions. I'm sure it'll be a good, it'll be of great value to all those people who will, manage to access this after this festival, after having viewed your films. And thank you for the wonderful work that you've all done. It was a pleasure, not only watching the films, but also learning more about the background and the details behind it. I'll let Pearl come back in. I don't know if she's ready to come back in. So I'm going to, yeah, there she is. Okay. Hi, Pearl. Okay. You're muted.
I'm back. I'm in.
Okay.
And I just I want to thank all of you, just like Shyam said, and for your time. But I also think it'd be nice to hear what either the new things you're working on now, or a way in which we can check out your films after the festival. I know, Jenny, you have a news to share, and Shyam, we can catch you on the radio on your weekly jazz show, right? You're a DJ on the local radio.
Right. Except that it was, hopefully it'll resume now. Now that the students are getting out of campus, I get back into the studio this Thanksgiving. So
yeah, is there somewhere online people could continue to listen to your very jazzy?
www.thelion.fm.
Super. And you're also the director. Sorry, say that again.
Mornings from 9 to 11.
Yeah, 9 to 11 online or on your radio. And you're also the director of the Media Effects
Research Lab.
Research Lab, where they study the effects that media have on other humans. And I'm sure you're not surprised.
On the psychological effects of media. Yeah,
that's right.
Thank you for running that. Yeah.
Well, it's very important work, and I think it relates to work that we do here, trying to bring films to audiences and understand how filmmakers think through their process, for which I am so grateful that all of you spoke to the individualized voices, individualized spaces, the ethics behind your work, the craft itself. As difficult as some of the subjects are, you still manage to, for lack of a better term, entertain or engage an audience so that we could be involved in some of the questions that you ask through your work. So thank you so very much for that. Jenny, what's going on with your film?
So the film was picked by MTV Documentaries, and we are going to have theatrical run from December the 11th. And you could check out upcoming screenings at our website, www.funding.com, and go to the See the Film page. We'll have all the updates there.
Thank you. And Alex, what about you? What are you working on? Is there something you could share with us and tell us? I know you were already at the Museum of Modern Art in New York with Limbo. Anything happening with Limbo or your new project?
Yeah, so you can check out alexfattal.net. That's my website. I've got more information on these 2 books, and I'm still contemplating my next move in terms of filmmaking. So I do have this kind of academic career that is still in the foreground, and ideally the filmmaking and the academics gets increasingly kind of interwoven. So I think Limbo is a good experiment in that regard. But yeah.
Yeah, and we're so grateful for that. I think that it's nice, as you can see from all 3 of these artists, like they have really unique ways of getting to their work, totally different kind of voices. And you're one of them, Alex, where you get to mesh those 2, where it's the academic intellectual approach, the scholarly research approach, and the filmmaking approach. So thank you for your work. And I know, Tony, you said that your work is on Kino Lorber. Anything else you want to share with us other than the fact that your film called Windows is going to be showing as part of the pandemic shorts that was just installed at the Miller Gallery in Pittsburgh. So we'll get another taste of your perspective tomorrow during the pandemic shorts. But anything else you want to add about how people can check out your work, or anything you want them to think about in terms of your work or being able to engage with you?
They can go to braddockfilms.com, and they can reach me through there. And also, I have different shorts that on there. And also, a film is, I don't own it. It's a film I directed called Ghost of Amistad in the Footsteps of the Rebels. It's just made available now for free from the University of Pittsburgh website. You can go to their YouTube channel. So it's available there. You can download it. It's also been subtitled in 3 other different languages: Italian, French, and Spanish. So people can check that film out. And I've been working on, through the past year, I've been filming different demonstrations there in Pittsburgh. So I have a project I'm working on called Pittsburgh, A Year in Protest.
Right, and we're going to look forward to seeing that. And hopefully we'll be able to welcome all of you back here in Center County. I know that, Tony, that's not too far for you. Jenny, we'll see what you come up with next as your next project. I'm sure it's already in the making. And we'll hopefully have you back here as well, maybe on our jury or maybe as a filmmaker. And Shyam, you're not going anywhere. So you introduced for us last year. You did it again this year.
I'm to State College what Tony is to Braddock. I've been here 25 years.
I just saw Penn State lost again, 0-4. I know.
Oh my God! Yeah.
Kurt might pop himself in if you're going to start talking about football. But if there's nothing else you'd like to add, I'm sure there is a lot more. But I just want to say thank you so much. And we loved having you here. And for those who are watching, if there's anything you want to send us, talk to us. Don't forget about the Audience Award. You could let us know what you've chosen before tomorrow at noon. Otherwise, we will see you at the next Q&A, which is Finding Joy at, Kurt, what time? 7:30. I'm going to say it so slow that you think I would.
7:45.
7:45. Thank you. I was so close. 7:45. We'll see you all here live. This has been such an honor. I love all of your work. To be continued. Thank you.
Thank you, Pearl, for hosting again. Thank you, Jenny.